Hey guys, welcome to Gideon Stuff and welcome to another episode of Gideon Stuff Adventures. I'm really excited about this one because we're talking about one of my favorite areas in New Mexico and one of my favorite tourist attractions in this area. The Glenwood Catwalks in the Mogollon Mountains. Alright, so bit of a different background. This is the first Gideon Stuff Adventure video that I'm filming in my new place. I do not have my geologic map put up on the wall yet, unfortunately. I wish I did, but that's probably going to be okay because I think today we're going to focus a little bit more on the history of the area rather than the geology. We are, of course, going to touch on the geology of the catwalks and the tectonic setting of the area, but we're also going to talk a lot about history today. If I start sweating, it's because I turned my swamp cooler off because it is too freaking loud for filming, and it's 102 degrees outside, so it's probably going to warm up in here fairly quickly. Some time ago, I was having a conversation with someone who was moving to Las Cruces, New Mexico for school. And as we're sitting and talking, I asked what they were excited about. They said, yeah, I'm excited about coming to school, but, I'm not really excited about being in New Mexico. It's such an ugly state. And that, I took that personally. I took that personally. I said, what do you mean? And it turns out that this girl's only exposure to New Mexico up to this point was that she had driven I-10 through New Mexico. From like El Paso through Cruces, Deming, Lordsburg, and into Arizona. And I love the desert scenery, but I will say that I-10 does cut through some fairly uninteresting scenery, especially getting out towards the Lordsburg area. And so I told this girl, well, you've only ever seen a tiny fraction of the state. You need to get out more and see some more beautiful forests and mountains. And she said, you guys have forests? I said, yeah, we've got forests. We have high alpine mountains. She said, oh, well, like up north by Colorado. I said, no, we've got some here in southern New Mexico, the Sacramento Mountains. Sierra Blanca is a great example. If you go west, you've got places like the Mogollon Mountains. So I recommended that the next time she had a chance, she should make it a point to go and visit the Glenwood Catwalks. And in fact, I recommend the catwalks to a lot of people who think that New Mexico is just dry scrubland, because this will be an eye-opening experience for those people. It consistently shocks me how many people just don't know how varied and diverse New Mexico is. I love the desert. The Chihuahuan Desert is one of my favorite places on Earth, but I also love that New Mexico has such a variety of ecosystems. Alpine mountains, grasslands, prairies, the desert. We've got all kinds of really, really awesome stuff, and each ecosystem brings its own charms and visual beauty, and I appreciate all of it. Now, one of the other reasons that I recommend the catwalks to so many people, because I tell everyone to go there. And one of the reasons is because it's a very accessible way to experience a pretty inaccessible part of the state. Western New Mexico is fascinating to me because it is so rugged. You have areas like the Gila Wilderness, the first ever established wilderness in the United States, that is a vast pocket of pretty rugged terrain. There's not very many roads or trails in this area. And so when you are out in the Gila, you really, really feel like you're on the frontier. It's got just a taste to it almost. You can feel that you are kind of an interloper in someone else's world, and that someone else might be watching you from the trees. It's a feeling that I really, really love, but it's definitely not the most tourism-friendly experience. And besides a lack of developed roads and cities and towns and stuff, The Mogollon Mountains and the Gila Wilderness are also just incredibly rugged. There's a reason why there aren't that many settlements out there. Most of the settlements that were established out there were very small, established in the 1800s and fairly quickly abandoned. It is a very difficult environment to try to live in, which I love. I absolutely love that. It feels so raw. Here come the sweats. Now, there are two main tourist attractions in the Gila that are very accessible. And those are the Gila Cliff Dwellings, which I'll make a video on at some point, and the Catwalks. And I think the Catwalks is the better of the two attractions. The Gila Cliff Dwellings are amazing, and I love them so much. Do not get me wrong. And if you're interested in anthropology, if you're interested in native cultures, if you're interested in the human history of the Southwest, you might enjoy the Cliff Dwellings more. But if you're more into stunning scenery, geology, hiking, things like that, you will probably enjoy the Catwalks a lot more. And, well, I just told you where I fall on that spectrum. Now, accessibility is something that I want to talk about a little bit. And to talk about that, I want to tell you guys about why I started this series in the first place. The Gideon Stuff Adventure series was actually born from a Google Earth document that I've been maintaining over the past couple of years. Basically, whenever I go exploring a new place, I do a new hike, a backpacking trip, something, I find places that just speak to me. And so I've created this Google Earth document where I put pinpoints at these different places, and I upload some photos that I've taken at these areas. And it's just kind of for me, it feels like a collection of my adventures, which is exactly what I call the document. It's just called Adventures. And so that's very special to me. And when I first started this document, I decided that I did not want to include any of my visits to national parks, national monuments, state parks, things like that. It's like, these are too mainstream. These are, things that are already marked on Google Earth. So I want to just add new places that I found, places that are out of the way that, maybe only a handful of other people even know about. And that was for a long time how I maintained that document. And then, of course, I decided that I wanted to start making some videos documenting some of my adventures into some of these places. So I started uploading to YouTube. And eventually this series has changed from just me out wandering around showing some scenery to kind of documentary style videos where I talk about the geology and the history of an area. Really, they're geography documentaries. I talk about the physical and cultural geography. The physical geography revolves around the geology, the landscape, the flora and fauna of an area. And cultural geography comes from when I discuss the human element of an area. Cities, towns, state parks, development of resources, mining, things like that. And as my style of video making changed, so did my perception of my adventures documents. See, I got more interested in sharing fun facts and knowledge with people, and I realized, I could just share knowledge about all kinds of different places, national parks, state parks, monuments, this, that, and the other, because these are national monuments and parks for a reason, right? They've got cool stories behind them, and I think that I would like to tell them. I'd like to share them with people. And sharing these places is the whole reason I started making these YouTube videos. And I've received several comments from people saying, I am so glad that you made this video because, I'm never going to have the chance to go and visit this place in person. Either because it'd be too much of a financial commitment, traveling all the way across the country, or in some cases the world, to see a single canyon that I made a video about. is a lot, right? But sometimes it's because of physical restrictions. Someone's disabled and they can't go on this backpacking hike. And so my video is a way for them to kind of vicariously experience this natural wonder. And I took that very seriously, and I think that that is the best way that these videos can benefit my audience, right? Is by showing you guys something that garbage truck is really loud. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone to see for one reason or another. And the other thing is with these videos, I would try to sometimes, when I did start making videos about like talking about maybe more well-known places, I would be like, oh, I'm not going to film that much because, I want to keep some things a surprise. I don't want to spoil it for anyone. And I realized that's a dumb thing to think because, again, I'm making these videos for people who maybe can't experience the actual site for themselves. So I want to try to give you guys the experience of walking through this area, going on a hike with me, just experiencing something as if you're standing right next to me. And so with the Catwalks, I think this was a great example for me to go to a place that is fairly well known, get a lot of footage recorded, and share it with you guys. But the other great thing about the Catwalks is it is very accessible. They even have half a mile of wheelchair accessible trail built into this canyon. So if you are someone who struggles to meet the demands, the physical demands of hiking or wilderness exploration, this is a great site for you to come and really experience it for yourself. So I highly recommend that if you are ever in New Mexico, in western or southern New Mexico in specific, make an effort to go out to this area. I don't think you'll regret it. It costs $5 per vehicle to get in, and I think that is the best $5 you will ever spend. It used to be $3. They raised it to $5. Still an amazing deal. And again, the Mogollon Mountains are incredibly rugged. You have to be an experienced adventurer to try and tackle them. And so the Catwalks gives a very accessible point of entry to these mountains, and you can get a lot of enjoyment out of this area. Now, the Catwalks are still fairly remote. It is going to be about a 60-mile drive from Silver City north to the Mogollon Mountains. You'll pass through Cliff and Glenwood. Glenwood's the nearest town, and there's not many amenities in these areas, but Glenwood does have a gas station with bathrooms and food and stuff, so you can fill up with fuel. So you do still get that sense of, when we're out at the Catwalks, you do get that sense of, wow, I am out here. But again, you've got parking lot, you've got some roads that go in there, so it's a good experience. I love the Catwalks. For the past several years, I've gone to the Catwalks 2 or 3 times a year because I love this area so much. The drive between Silver City and Glenwood is one of my favorite. Actually, we're going to extend the drive between going from Silver City to Reserve. Heck, even from Silver City to Daddle or Pie Town. One of my favorite drives ever. Heck, going from Silver up to Luna and then over into Arizona. I love driving along that road, 180. It is not 180, 152, 159, which goes up through Mogollon, turns into a dirt road, becomes Bursum Road, and then what does it become at that junction? There's a certain bend in the road just north of the Aldo Leopold Vista picnic area where you turn east and you drop down into this big arroyo, and the Mogollon Mountains are there ahead of you, and you can see Whitewater, Baldy, you can see the other peaks, and they just loom so massively in front of you. It takes my breath away every single time. I absolutely freaking love it. It's a great drive. Just if you like scenic drives, it's a good one. It's a real good one. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the geology of the Mogollon Mountains and the Glenwood Catwalks. And before we do that, I want to give, it's been a while since I've given a shout out to this series of books. This is the Geology of Southern New Mexico's Parks, Monuments, and Public Lands. There's a sister edition of this that's for Northern New Mexico. I've actually got it sitting right over here. These are amazing resources if you're interested in geology as just kind of a passing interest. These books are written by geoscientists, but they're written for non-geoscience audiences. These are very, very easy to read, to understand, and they're just excellent, excellent resources for understanding New Mexico's geology. Absolutely fantastic book. There is a section in here about the catwalks. They have a whole section about the Mogollon Daddle volcanic field, which we'll be talking about here in a little bit. And I also want to give a shout out to the Roadside Geology of New Mexico. This is the second edition. I think this is the newest edition. I don't know if they've done a third edition yet, but these are great books. A lot of states have books in this series. They're all written by different authors. These are incredible. Even if you get some of the older editions, I actually have the first edition of this sitting up on my bookshelf right now. Very, very fun reads. Of course, the newer one has more accurate, up-to-date information. But this is just a phenomenal book. Full color pictures. You've got, let's find one, geologic maps. You have stratigraphic columns. All kinds of really, really helpful information to, just kind of help you out if you're driving through an area and you're wanting to put together the geologic history. These are great books. So those are going to be some of the sources that I'm using for this video, as well as publications, science articles, as well as some other blogs, which will all be linked in the description down below. The geologic history of the Mogollon Mountains begins about 40 million years ago. This coincides with what geologic event? Come on, guys. We've talked about it so many times on the channel. That's right, the end of the Laramide orogeny. Around this time, between 40 million years and 25 million years ago, northern Mexico and the southwestern United States were absolutely engulfed by wave after wave of massive volcanic eruptions. And today we call this the Oligocene ignimbrite flare-up. Now, what caused the ignimbrite flare-up? It could be because the Farallon plate that started subducting underneath the western edge of the continent finally started to sink into the mantle, and this caused some mantle upwelling. This brought magma closer to the surface, and that magma was able to find vents to erupt onto the surface. The Oligocene ignimbrite flare-up, also sometimes called the mid-tertiary ignimbrite flare-up because it did, last beyond the Oligocene, but it started in the Oligocene. This flare-up created several different volcanic fields throughout the western United States and northern Mexico. And the one that we're going to be talking about today is the Mogollon Daddle volcanic field. And this is one of the largest volcanic fields left behind by this event. In fact, technically, I'm sitting in the Mogollon Daddle volcanic field right now. It extends into Las Cruces. The Organ Mountains are actually the remnants of a huge caldera called the Organ Mountains caldera that was formed around the same time that the Mogollon Mountains were being formed. And so all these calderas are related to the same event. We call them synorogenic. And you can see how widespread this activity was from Las Cruces all the way up to Daddle. Now, the oldest rocks from this particular phase of the ignimbrite flare-up are about 36 million years old, and we will actually see them at the catwalks. In fact, the main walls of the canyon are eroded through a 36 million year old tuff called the Cooney Tuff. Now, before we move on too much further, there's a couple of terms that I want to define. Some words I've already thrown around. Tuff, ignimbrite, caldera. What do all these mean? Well, let's start with tuff and ignimbrite because they're kind of the same thing. Ignimbrite and tuff are both terms used for volcanic rocks derived from pyroclastic materials. However, ignimbrite refers to a specific kind of welded tuff, where the pyroclastic materials are compacted and kind of melted together. Awesome, Gideon, but what the heck does pyroclastic mean? Well, it comes from two Greek, actually it might be Latin, some language. Pyro means fire and clastic means broken or bits. So pyroclastic refers to hot bits of rock. These are most commonly associated with pyroclastic flows. Think about Mount Vesuvius, the eruption that destroyed Pompeii. A huge cloud of molten debris rushed down the slopes of this mountain and buried the city. That cloud was made of hot gases and ash and really, really hot, tiny particles of rock and glass fragments. That's a pyroclastic flow, and those flows become ignimbrites. In fact, another term for an ignimbrite is a pyroclastic density current. Ignimbrite's a little easier to say, I guess. It's shorter. Sometimes when these pyroclastic flows are hot enough, the individual grains and bits of material in the flow will be welded together. They'll kind of melt and become fused in a way. And that's where we get the term ignimbrite. This doesn't always happen. Sometimes the particles are not fused together, they're not welded. And so the term tuff refers to both kinds of pyroclastic depositions. You can have a welded tuff or a non-welded tuff. So all ignimbrites are tuffs, but not all tuffs are ignimbrites, if that makes sense. Okay, that's great. But what's a caldera? Well, a caldera is a collapsed volcano. When magma gathers under the surface, we call it a magma chamber. This magma can work its way to the surface and erupt through vents called volcanoes. After enough of this material is erupted, you start to empty the chamber, and these violent eruptions can destabilize the entire system. And eventually you can reach a point where the roof of the magma chamber collapses down into the chamber itself, and you form a big depression that we call a caldera. The Mogollon volcanic field preserves the remains of over 20 supervolcano calderas. These document 20 calderas, 20 supervolcanoes on the scale of something like Yellowstone that erupted several times throughout the history of the Mogollon volcanic field. That is catastrophic. That's a lot of freaking volcanism. That's like insane to think about. But when you're driving through western New Mexico and you're looking around, you're seeing all these pink and kind of white colored volcanic rocks. These are remains of ashes laid down by these eruptions. These are pyroclastic flows from the eruptions of 20 supervolcanoes. And they are all over the state. The volcanic rocks of western New Mexico show a wide variety of compositions. Today, we're mostly going to be focusing on rocks of a rhyolitic composition, but we have dacites and basalts and andesites throughout the area as well. And most of these andesites and basalts are related to pre-caldera eruptions. How much geochemistry do I want to go into right now? We'll try and keep it mild. When we're looking at a suite of volcanic rocks that range from basalts to rhyolite, we call this a bimodal volcanic system. And we call it bimodal because we can track two different modes of volcanism: mafic volcanism and felsic volcanism. Now, mafic igneous rocks are rocks that are extremely rich in iron and magnesium. These are going to be rocks like basalt. And most magmas start out with a mafic composition. Felsic rocks are more rich in things like potassium and sodium, and they're also more viscous than mafic rocks, meaning that they resist flow. So mafic rocks are typically the first rocks that get erupted in a volcanic area. And that's because they're less dense and more viscous, or they're less, what did I say? Yeah, more dense and less viscous, so it can rise up through the crust easier. When you have this magma of a mafic composition sitting under the crust, it can start to mix with the chemistry of these crustal rocks, and become more felsic. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but typically basalts are going to be the first rock that you see erupted. And these rocks, when they come to the surface, this magma comes to the surface and becomes lava, it flows, right? It's less viscous, so it flows easier. If you've ever seen videos of the eruptions in Hawaii where you see this hot lava slowly creeping over a road or something, that's a basaltic lava, and it's allowed to flow. And so these style of eruptions typically build up these kind of big mounds of material. When you picture a volcano, you probably think of like, one of those big cone volcanoes. And this is kind of what these eruptions are forming, because as the lava boils out of the crust, it stacks and it forms layers that build up into these hills and mountains. And these are going to be small volume eruptions. There's not a whole lot of material being moved through the system at this point. But things start to change. I mentioned that this magma sitting underneath the surface can start to assimilate the crust around it. It starts to melt the rock around it. And the rock around it is typically continental crust, which has a very granitic composition. And so as you're mixing this granitic composition with this more mafic composition, you're getting a more felsic magma. And again, you're melting the country rock, the surrounding rock, and this is going to be what forms your calderas. And so slowly you start building more magma and it starts changing composition. As a magma becomes more felsic, it also becomes more viscous, meaning that it resists flow. These kind of magmas do not like to move. They will not, ooze like molasses like a basaltic magma. Instead, they explode. And that's exactly what happened. These calderas that were, these magma chambers that were hosting felsic magmas erupted violently. And they spewed hot ash and gas and pyroclastic material for hundreds of miles in every direction. And then the caldera was formed when the roof of the magma chamber collapsed. I mentioned that there was 20 calderas in this area. Not all of them happened at the same time. In fact, there's kind of a sequence, and some of the calderas are burying others. One of the largest calderas in this area is the Bursum caldera. It's one of the most well-preserved and easiest to study, but it is actually it blew up in the middle of an older caldera called the Mogollon caldera. And because of that, information about the Mogollon caldera is a little bit scarce because it's been destroyed by the subsequent eruption, but that Mogollon caldera is what erupted the tuffs that would become the Whitewater Canyon that we're going to be visiting today. Now, after millions and millions of years of violent eruptions, all of these pyroclastic materials stacked up into huge sequences of igneous rock. We're talking thousands of feet thick. And in the years after their deposition, extension in the area from the Basin Range and the Rio Grande Rift would cause faulting to break these units up, pushing some of them up, dropping some of them down, and bada bing, bada boom, we formed the Mogollon Mountains, which again are just such a beautiful, gorgeous mountain range. They stand very, very proud of their lower valleys. These are mountains that have relief greater than some of the peaks out in the Sangre de Cristos and the Rocky Mountains. Not as high elevations. I think, Whitewater Baldy is getting up to about 10,500 feet. Definitely not small mountains, but the relief, bottom to top, on these mountains is just staggering. It's so impressive and beautiful, and I freaking love it. Now, you will see as we move through the canyon, we're going to see a couple different sequences of rock. Most of the rock that we see is going to be the Cooney Tuff, and we'll talk more about Cooney here in a little bit. And it's kind of a purpley pink color, and there's a couple different members of the Cooney Tuff, but it's all about the same age. But we're also going to see a couple of sequences of dark rock, and I can't remember, it's been months since I filmed the footage that you guys are going to see in this video, and I can't remember whether I pointed this out or not, but some of the more mafic rocks we see some andesites out there, for example, are actually traveling up through faults in the Cooney Tuff. So we have these dikes of andesite and other intermediate to mafic rocks that are working their way up through faulting between the Cooney Tuff layers. And then there's also some layers of dark black rock that almost looks mafic, but it's probably just a type of very, very glass rich welded tuff segment. But yeah, all kinds of cool stuff that we're going to see today. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the history of the Catwalks area. And actually the history and the geology intersect. See, the Mogollon Mountains have been a hotspot for mining since the 1860s. Lots and lots of profitable veins of valuable material have been found throughout these mountains. These veins are occurring primarily in faults throughout the igneous rocks of the area. When you fault a rock, you open up cracks, and these cracks allow water to get into the rock. The water interacts with the rock, and it can dissolve water-soluble elements. Fun fact, all metals are water-soluble. That might seem really weird, but it's true. All metals are water-soluble. In addition, because this area has a volcanic history, there are several hot springs throughout these mountains. The most famous one that I can think of right now is San Francisco hot springs. These hot springs are a result of geothermal energy in the area that's residual from all the volcanism that caused the calderas. This heat provides a lot of energy that heats up water that can aid in the dissolution of different materials, and you have water that's flowing through these rocks becoming supersaturated in minerals and metals and all kinds of good yummy things. Well, then this water finds places where it just collects and it pools, it gets trapped between different rock units. Eventually the water evaporates because, again, there's a lot of heat in the system, both from the geothermal energy and also because, well, this area very frequently sees temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit, not Celsius, like 32 degrees Celsius. And so the water will evaporate and it leaves behind these heavier elements that don't turn to a gas and escape with the water. And all these elements stack up and they form veins of material that can later be mined. Something that a lot of people, I think, tend to overlook is the fact that starting in about the 1860s and lasting until like the 1910s, the Western United States kind of saw a big gold rush. But not really a gold rush because it wasn't just gold that people were interested in. New Mexico has had a couple of gold rushes throughout its history, nothing on the scale of the California gold rush of the 1840s or anything like that. But during the 1860s, geologists and prospectors were discovering a lot of economic mineral deposits in the American Southwest. And this led to a boom, an explosion of mining towns and facilities popping up all over the West. Specifically in places like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, areas like this. And a lot of these towns were kind of, light and burn kind of places that would appear and disappear just as quickly. And the materials that people were after included gold, silver, copper, fluorspar. And the reason that this kind of boom lasted as long as it did, again, I said from like the 1860s to the 1910s, that's a big chunk of time. That's maybe a little bit more chunk of time than would be considered a gold rush. But the reason that it lasted that long was because as technology evolved, our mining methods and procedures got better and better. We could dig deeper. We could extract more efficiently. But technology was also advancing, and we were finding new uses for different minerals and elements and natural resources. For example, fluorspar, which is the mining term for the mineral fluorite, was used in vast quantities during the turn of the century to anneal steel. As steel became a very important commodity, lots and lots of fluorite was being mined to help make more and more steel. And fun fact, actually, in the American Southwest, a lot of fluorite mines that were closed during the 1910s, 1920s were reopened during World War II to help with the production of war machines. The Mogollon mining district probably deserves a video all of its own. This area in the Mogollon Mountains produced just insane amounts of silver and other ores during its heyday. In fact, at one point, I believe the town of Mogollon was producing like a third of the silver that was being taken out of all of New Mexico. Pretty wild, very, very rich deposits in this area. But let's go ahead and zoom in on one guy in particular right now. James Cooney. Remember the Cooney Tough? Well, it's named after this guy. James Cooney was a soldier at Fort Bayard, which was located south of the Mogollon Mountains near Silver City, around the modern town of Bayard, New Mexico. Surprise, surprise. And during an expedition, a scouting trip to the Mogollon Mountains in 1870, he discovered gold and silver deposits near a place called Mineral Creek. Unfortunately, Mr. Cooney was a soldier in the United States Army, and so Uncle Sam owned him. But 5 years later, in 1875, Cooney was discharged, and he was able to return to Mineral Spring or Mineral Creek and start excavating his find. Cooney realized that he had found something pretty incredible. He was stumbling across really, really awesome deposits of gold, silver, and copper. Silver and copper would become the most economical resources taken from the Mogollon mining district, but there was also significant amounts of gold. So Cooney decided that he was going to capitalize on this, and he found a partner, a guy named John Lambert, and they traced these veins of metals south and to what would now become kind of the heart of the Mogollon mining district, and they went to business. There were a lot of different mines dug in this area, as I said, but the most profitable mine that came from Cooney and Lambert's exploration was the Confidence Mine, which was mined to a depth of about 1,000 feet, and $1.2 million worth of ore was taken out of it. Do you know how much money $1.2 million was in the 1880s? I had to double check to know. I could not believe this. I was like, $1.2 million in the 1880s? What? That's an insane amount of money. And yeah, that's the equivalent of about $43 million today. So yeah, these guys, they had struck it rich. Literally. Cooney would mine his claims for about 5 years, and during this time, about 400 miners and prospectors and investors and adventurers would flock to his camp to work in these mines. Unfortunately, he never got to enjoy his wealth because he was murdered. In 1880, Cooney and a friend of his were traveling from the mining camp to the nearby town of Alma, New Mexico, when they were ambushed by a group of Apache led by Chief Victorio, who was a pretty prominent figure in the area, and Cooney was killed. His friends would later arrive at the scene of the crime, and they carved a tomb into the rock in that area to bury Cooney. And in fact, he is still there today. You can go and visit his tomb. I wanted to include Cooney's tomb and Mineral Creek in this video, but I think they probably deserve their own video. So we're going to go ahead and just, separate from that. I really do want to make some videos about the kind of Wild West times of the Mogollon area, because there are some wild stories of outlaws and the Indian Wars and all kinds of stuff. It's good stuff, but we're gonna move past it for now. I will mention a couple of other famous people from Western legend that were familiar with this canyon. Geronimo hid out in the Catwalks Canyon, in the Whitewater Canyon, to evade the United States. And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were known to go to the Whitewater Canyon to swim in the swimming hole and just kind of hang out while avoiding the Pinkertons. So that's pretty cool. Cooney's original discovery proved to be incredibly profitable, and tons of material continued to be taken out of these mines, and it soon became apparent that some processing facilities were needed closer to the mines. Enter a Mr. Graham. John Graham was the superintendent of the Confidence Mine for many years, and again, that was a mine that produced the $1.2 million payload, and he realized that they were kind of inefficient in their processes with the mines right now. You had to take material out and then haul it all the way to, I don't even know where, but they had to haul that material quite a way to get it processed. So he decided that he was going to build a processing facility at the mouth of Whitewater Canyon. And this was a great location because it was about 2 miles from some of the bigger mines, but it was a very ambitious plan. See, in order to run a processing mill for extracting minerals from rocks, you need a lot of water. Now, at the time, there was one road connecting the town of Mogollon to the San Francisco River, and a lot of the mines in this area were, pretty close to this town and this road. But that road was rather dangerous. Number one, just because, again, the terrain in the Mogollon Mountains is incredibly rugged, but also because it was kind of a hotspot for bandits and outlaws to rob people. So something else had to be done. You couldn't put this mill down by the San Francisco River because then ore shipments would probably get robbed on their way there. So the next available water source was the Whitewater Canyon. Lower down from the canyon, out towards the valley, the Whitewater Creek really opens up. It becomes very, very wide and broad, and it's ephemeral. There's not a whole lot of water there year-round. You'll have flash floods that run through. Sometimes it's just a trickle of water going through there, and sometimes it dries up entirely. But if you go up into the mountains, closer to the mouth of the Slot Canyon, you've got water all the time. And so this was where Graham decided that he was going to build his processing plant right at the mouth of this Slot Canyon, where he had easy access to water and, it was kind of a protected area. So they built this processing mill. And basically the way that it would work was miners would come down the Bursum Road, and then they come around to the back of the mill, and they put the ore into chutes that would lead down to the mill that was hundreds of feet below this mesa top. In order to get the water, Graham decided that he was going to build a pipeline through the Slot Canyon. He had a 4-inch diameter pipe that was built 3 miles back into this canyon to bring a steady supply of water to the mill. Again, this is the 1880s when all of this is being put together. This is a pretty crazy idea. This is almost outlandish at the time. But Graham was a tenacious little bugger, and he had some good friends that helped him get the funding and the connections that he needed to make this happen. One of them being David Moffett, the former governor of Colorado. And in 1893, the mill and the pipeline were finished. Naturally, as happens near places of economic interest, a town started to sprout up around this mill. And I think this is kind of funny. Officially, the town was known as Graham, named after the guy that built the mill, but locals just called the place Whitewater. And that is such a New Mexican thing. This big hotshot gets in there, builds this mill, this town springs up. He's like, we're going to name this place after me. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, cool, you can do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to call this place Whitewater, but you do you, right? Like, okay, whatever. It doesn't really matter much what people wanted to call the town because it only lasted for a decade. During that decade, they had, everything that a town during this time period needed: a saloon, general store, dance hall, all that kind of stuff. But in 1913, the mill closed permanently. The mill and the pipes were taken apart and sold for scrap. Although you can still see the foundations of the mill in the modern day parking lot for the recreation area. And in fact, that parking lot is built on top of what used to be the town of Graham. Now, despite the mill and the town of Graham being relatively short-lived, a lot of work went into constructing this mill, including the building of what would become known as the Catwalks. Installing the pipe that Graham envisioned into this twisting, winding, narrow, deep slot canyon was difficult. In order to do it, workers would come in from the top of the canyon on ropes, and they'd kind of drop down to the canyon, they'd hang on the ropes on the wall of the canyon, and they'd chisel holes into the side of the canyon to anchor this pipeline. You can actually still see a lot of these original holes from the construction of the first Catwalks pipeline today. Of course, these holes would have held bolts and cables that would have supported wooden skeletons to hold the pipe and everything like that. However, the 4-inch pipe that was installed originally proved to be inadequate for the needs of the mill and the town that was growing around it. So, in 1897, they redid the whole thing, and they switched the 4-inch pipe for an 18-inch pipe. This larger pipe provided more water, bigger hole, more wet, and it ran basically right next to the original pipe. But it was a nightmare to maintain. This is a slot canyon with an active creek rushing down from 10,000-foot mountains. The flooding risk is extreme, and the pipeline was consistently being battered by floods. And so the workers that would go out to fix the pipe would walk on top of the wooden and metal structures holding this pipe into place to do repairs. And these workers, bouncing around like freaking acrobats, came to call it the Catwalk. Obviously, because balance and everything like that. Now again, in 1913, the mill shut down, the town vanished, and a lot of the piping was taken out of the canyon and sold for scrap. There are still original sections of the pipe out there. We will see some of them in this video. There's even still some original remnants of the wooden planks that these workers would walk along to maintain the pipe. But after 1913, the canyon was pretty much just left alone until the 1930s. In the wake of the Great Depression, President Roosevelt launched a lot of different programs to help Americans get back on their feet. And one of these programs was the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC was prolific, and they built a bunch of stuff all over the country. Trails, roads, bridges. In fact, a lot of the early work on areas that would later become national parks or monuments and things were first established by the CCC. A lot of trail building was done by these guys, a ton. In 1935, the CCC went to Glenwood, New Mexico to build an access into the Whitewater Canyon. Now, this original recreation area, amazingly, only took 2 years to build, which is kind of wild to me, but it was made of wood. And yeah, they saw the same issues that the miners had seen with the pipes. This wooden structure took a lot of damage over the years. So in the 1960s, they took out the wooden catwalks and they put in new one made out of concrete and metal. Fast forward all the way to 2012. And there's a devastating fire in the Mogollon Mountains. The Whitewater Baldy fire stripped the slopes of the Mogollon Mountains of vegetation. And the next year, in 2013, heavy rains ran unimpeded down the slopes of the mountains and into Whitewater Canyon. The massive flooding destroyed the catwalks. This, in 2013, the floods in the Mogollon Mountains caused a lot of problems. I think at least one person was killed, maybe more. 18 tourists were actually stranded in the almost ghost town of Mogollon. It was a mess, and the catwalks were one of the fatalities. The catwalks were rebuilt and reopened in 2016, and they haven't been completely restored to what they originally were. There's still work going on. Again, floods still happen. Things have to be, rebuilt every now and again, but the catwalks are open again for people to go and enjoy. Thankfully, because they are really, really freaking awesome. Well, here we are at the head of the canyon, Whitewater Canyon, heading up into the catwalks. Not a whole lot of snow melt this year. It's been a pretty dry winter. The water is way, way lower than it should be. We were here a year ago. Okay, I asked you a question now, not to see gang signs. Whoa, what's up? Yeah, we were here like a year ago, and the water was a lot higher. I was here, not too long ago, like 10 months ago. The water is pretty high, but we'll see. The geology is going to be primarily volcanic tuffs, namely the Cooney Tuff. This was erupted out of the Bursum caldera, I believe. This area in the Mogollon Mountains underwent extensive volcanism during the Oligocene Ignimbrite flare-up, which started about 45 million years ago. And so we have incredibly thick sequences of ash flow after ash flow after ash flow stacked up in these little canyons and hills. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I actually don't know the exact age of the Cooney Tuff off the top of my head, but I will write that on the screen. Oh, it's heavenly. And jump scare. I know, you went straight to defensive mode. Your fight or flight kicked in and you chose fight. My life flashed before my eyes. So this right here.
This is a contact?
I think there is a contact right here. There's a fault.
Yeah.
There's a fault for sure. But I do think, well, I don't know. I do think we're in a different tuff right here than we're going to see later on. It's been a while since I've looked at a geologic map for the area. Man, it's just beautiful. Want to do some rock climbing? Lame. This was for the pipes. And they had them in here. Or it could have been, maybe they had the catwalk extended out here when the park first opened.
Imagine falling on one of those and
You do have trauma from your little tumble.
Yeah, I do.
That's all you can think about. You're gonna take a trip on this flat surface and fucking bust your tailbone.
Yeah,
Again.
Wow.
Wow. And here's the catwalks. You can actually see some old workings hanging off of the cliff there from the miners. we've got some decent flow going on here, I guess. Yeah, this pink tuff down here, that's the Cooney Canyon, or the Cooney tuff, I think, which is named after Cooney Canyon. Is it photo shoot time? Life changing. Yep, you do.
I'm a big guy. I fell.
She fell down a mountain. She's all bruised. Ah, here we go. Let's see. Someone wrote in 55 million years ago, not 55,000. Interesting. Interesting. Does it say what? Here's some of the things we can look for: the pumice, lithics, ash, which is what tuff is primarily made up of. I was hoping this would say what caldera that these tuffs were erupted out of. I think it was the Bursum caldera. I don't know. I don't know. Oh wow, we don't have to take our shoes off this time. Last time we were here, we had to ford across this little crossing here because it was all flooded over. Yeah. You need bridge pictures? Nice little fishing hole. You can see there's some pipes left over from the miner's water line. Man, this is beautiful. And up here we're getting pretty close to where the rest of the catwalks got washed away in the floods of, when was that? 2013? That's what I want to say, but I might not be correct. Last time I came around here, we had to go up that way because the water was too high here and it was too fast. We reached my favorite part of the hike, where I take my shoes off. I take every opportunity I can to take my shoes off. I like to get my little hobbit feet out. Yeah, I mean, look at this one. Shoes on, wet socks. Diabolical. Absolutely diabolical. Yeah, we did. We did. You'll recognize it here in a little bit. Wow. Yeah, so you remember this spot? This is where what was the name of that couple we were here with? I forgot their names. It's kind of a shame. And you guys all waited right here while I went all the way over. But I think this time, I think we can make it across real easy. So last time we were up here, we came all the way back out to here. And again, the water was much, much higher. It was probably up to about here. It was running a lot faster. Frickin' Miss Squelchy Boots over there. And then it was me and Jenelle and this other couple that we met on this hike. And they stayed right here. And I went across this way, kind of edging my way along the wall to the other side. But I think today, we're gonna go as far as we frickin' can. It's a nice little pool. Kinda wish I brought trunks. Well, here we are. They used to have a little bridge built right here. The old pipe. You can see where the trail washed out to the rest of the catwalks over there. Now I have actually made it past here on that trail, which is where we're gonna go. So it looks like we're seeing a couple of different lithologies right here. Maybe we've got this reddit, this kind of pinkish tuff. Got this whitish one. Both of them have a lot of lithics in them, but not necessarily the same lithics. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Still barefoot on the sharp ass rocks. Building up foot strength is good for you. I want to have little simian feet. I want to be able to hang upside down like a bat.
Oh my God,
I know. I know. That's what I was telling you. It's about to get better. He blends in so well. What did you see? Squirrel! This little drill hole. A glory hole? I mean, those miners had to do something out here. That's actually a good question. I don't know. So last time I was here with my sister, we came as far as the old steps there that went up to what used to be a bridge. Now the water's low enough that we have come to the other side.
Picture me face down on the rock.
This is uncharted territory. Not many people come back here anymore.
You know what I'm excited for?
Huh?
Pie.
Pie and Pie Town? Well, good, because that's all they have to offer.
I'm gonna get peanut butter.
Peanut butter pie? Okay. Hey, look! We found more catwalks.
Are we even allowed it here?
Think so. It's not gated off. Ooh, look at that little shelter.
You never come back to Florida?
Nope. This looks like a dude's face. His eyeball, his nose, and he's like screaming. He's got a big old chin. Huh?
The scents. Are those scents?
Oh, I hope we get over there. I bet what it is I bet it's like andesite or basalt stacked up. Oh yeah, we're gonna see outcropping up here. We can take a look. Love the way the water scoops it out. There used to be a bridge here. You know what? I think we can make it across. Definitely would not want to be right here during a rainstorm. Huh? Oh yeah, that's actually a really cool little cave. Whoa! This might be dead end for here. Yeah, looks like it. Alright, so I scaled up this wall. It's a little bit much for Jenelle, so she's waiting down there. I'm gonna see where this goes. I want to meet up with the trail on the other side of this bridge at least. I'm way higher than the bridge. And by extension, the trail. Ooh. Up on a cliff. Let's see what my options are. So I had to go back and get Jenelle because she couldn't miss this. It's just too good. Looks like the trail continues over there. We'll make our way back over there here in a second. Heading back, the views are just as good going as they are coming. They need to get me to write the brochures for these places. Brochures. I'll say so many nice things you have no idea. Love that little tunnel. Control bridge. It's not gonna throw us off or anything, but yeah. Wow. Now we're gonna go back this way. You want to sit here for a little bit? I actually do want to read these signs.
Oh.
I'll tell you in a little bit. Yeah. Well, if you guys come to the Catwalks and Whitewater picnic area, it's $5. Definitely $5 well spent. $5 per vehicle, not person. Definitely, probably the best thing you can do with $5, in my opinion. And that's gonna be it for today, guys. I am sweating like you would not believe, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this camera off and turn my swamp cooler on. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe. Big shout out to my channel members at the cowboy level. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there's a link down below. Until next time, I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios. Until next time, I've been Gideon, I'll see you in the next one. That was repetitive. Whatever. Adios.